Really? She asked, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Of course, he said, extending his hand. Come on, let's go for a walk. The child hesitated for a moment before she stood, her small hand reaching for his. But just as they were about to leave the table, the child's mother looked up, her gaze narrowing as she noticed the man and her daughter moving toward the door. Where do you think you're going? The mother's voice was sharp, cold, as though the mere idea of someone else paying attention to her daughter was an intrusion. The man paused, his hand still holding the child's. He didn't know how to respond. Should he tell her what he had witnessed? Should he call out the obvious lack of care, the indifference that had been on display for the entire meal? Instead, he simply turned back to the child, offering her a reassuring smile. We're just going to see the flowers for a minute. You deserve to enjoy something beautiful today. The mother's expression shifted from confusion to irritation, but she didn't say anything else. The man led the child out of the restaurant, his heart heavy with the knowledge that this moment, this simple act of kindness, wasn't enough to change anything for the mother or the father. But it was something. Outside, the cold air hit them as they stepped onto the sidewalk. The child looked up at the sky, her tears drying on her cheeks as she breathed in the fresh air. The man knelt down beside her and pointed toward a flower shop across the street, its windows glowing with warmth and color. Let's go there, he said, his voice light. Maybe we can pick out a few flowers. The child nodded eagerly, her spirits lifting for the first time all evening. As they walked toward the shop, the man couldn't help but wonder how many children, how many people were out there in the world, ignored, forgotten, their cries unheard. How many lives were being lived in isolation, surrounded by people who could do something, who could offer kindness, yet chose not to. Back inside the restaurant, the couple was still eating, still unaware of the scene they had just been a part of. The wife picked up her phone again, scrolling absent-mindedly. The husband spoke about a recent business deal, his voice a monotone that betrayed no emotion. The silence between them grew more pronounced, and the space felt colder. But now, something had shifted in the man's heart. His desire to see change, to see empathy, was stronger than ever. The stranger had made a small difference, but the question remained, could he make the couple see the truth? Could he make them feel what he felt, understand what they had missed? The evening wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And neither was the journey toward understanding. The story was just beginning, and the tension was only starting to build. What would happen when the stranger returned to face the couple? Would they finally see their failure, or would they continue to live in their bubble of ignorance? The answers were still out there, waiting to unfold. The days that followed were filled with quiet contemplation for the couple. The husband and wife, once wrapped in the luxury of their everyday lives, now found themselves reflecting on that moment in the restaurant, a moment that had suddenly shaken the foundations of their carefully built world. They had never thought of themselves as bad people after all. They had money, they had comfort, and they had their family. But in that fleeting encounter with the stranger and his quiet intervention, they had realized something important. They had lost touch with the very essence of what it meant to be human, to truly connect with those around them, especially with their own child. It wasn't easy for them to admit, but they both felt the sting of their neglect. They had been so caught up in their own pursuits, work, status, social gatherings, that they had become blind to the world right in front of them. To their daughter, to the very child they had brought into this world, they had become distant figures, unable to truly see her needs, her emotions, her cry for help. And yet, it wasn't too late to change. The stranger had shown them that much. He hadn't yelled at them, hadn't condemned them for their behavior. Instead, he had gently pointed out the truth, showing them what they had missed, not through anger, but through understanding. And in doing so, he had opened a door that had been closed for so long, a door that led to compassion, to human connection, and to the possibility of growth. The wife spent the next few days thinking about the child's face, how small and fragile she had seemed, how her tears had been ignored by two people who should have been her safe haven. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much she had failed her daughter. She wasn't a bad person, but she had been blind. She had been distracted by the trivialities of life, by things that, in the grand scheme of things, didn't matter at all. In a luxurious restaurant, a well-dressed couple sat comfortably in their corner booth, enjoying a lavish meal. But across the room, a little child sat at a nearby table, her tear-streaked face barely visible as her cries echoed through the space. The couple, oblivious to the heartache unfolding just a few feet away, continued to indulge in their meal, unaware of the message their indifference was sending to everyone around them. It was a scene that seemed to repeat itself too often: wealth, comfort, and detachment. But as the child's cries grew louder, something unexpected happened. A stranger, someone who had witnessed enough to understand the weight of empathy, stood up from their seat and began to walk toward the couple. What they did next would change everything. What happened next left the couple speechless, their minds racing with questions. Was this stranger about to challenge everything they thought they knew about kindness and compassion? Stay tuned to find out what happens when a simple act of humanity shatters their world of privilege. The man stepped toward the crying child, his shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. The couple, still lost in their meal, barely noticed his approach. He glanced over at the child, noticing how her small hands trembled as she wiped away her tears, her eyes wide with a sense of helplessness. The child wasn't the only one in pain. Her distress seemed to echo in the air around the entire room, filling the space with an unspoken tension. The man stopped just a few steps away from the child's table. He paused, taking in the scene. The child's mother was talking to the waiter, her voice calm, almost dismissive as she waved him off. She didn't look at her daughter once, completely oblivious to the pain her child was going through. The man looked back toward the booth where the couple sat, still engrossed in their conversation, as though nothing out of the ordinary was happening. With a deep breath, he decided he couldn't just stand by. He knew that this wasn't just about one child crying in a restaurant. This was a reflection of something much bigger: how the privileged often forgot the value of simple human connection and empathy. How people in their comfortable lives sometimes grew so disconnected from the world around them, from the struggles of others, that they became numb to the pain they could easily ease. He approached the child's table, crouching down to her level. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, his voice calm yet filled with genuine concern. The child looked up at him, her eyes puffy and red from crying. She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, his heart aching as he looked into her eyes. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I want my mommy. She doesn't listen to me." The man's heart tightened. He glanced back at the mother, who still hadn't turned her attention to the child. She was focused on her food, talking animatedly with her husband, her laughter echoing in the air as though everything in the world was fine. The disconnect between the mother and her daughter was palpable, an invisible chasm that only the man seemed to notice. "I'm sorry," the man said gently, reaching into his pocket for a tissue. "I'm sure your mom is just really busy right now. But I'm here, okay? You're not alone." He handed her the tissue, and the child took it hesitantly, wiping her eyes again. She managed a small smile, her relief almost visible in the way her shoulders relaxed slightly. But the sadness still lingered in her eyes. Meanwhile, the couple at the booth continued to eat, completely unaware of the growing tension at the other table. The husband, with his perfectly styled hair and expensive watch, took a sip of his wine. The wife, adjusting her gold bracelet, was scrolling through her phone, oblivious to anything outside her bubble of luxury. The man watched them for a moment, the frustration inside him building. How could they not see the child's distress? How could they not hear her sobs, even when they echoed through the restaurant? Were they so wrapped up in their own world that the cries of a child, the simple plea for attention, meant nothing to them? He stood there for a moment, staring at the couple, hoping for something to shift. A sign, a change, a flicker of realization. But nothing came. It was as though they were surrounded by an invisible wall, one built from privilege, from comfort, from an insular life that had erased any sense of responsibility toward others. The man could feel his anger rising, but he knew that shouting at them wouldn't help. He needed to approach this differently. He turned back to the child and crouched down again, offering her a smile. "Do you want to go see the flowers outside?" he asked gently. I bet they'd make you feel better. Her eyes brightened, the suggestion of something beautiful lifting her spirits, even if just a little. What mattered, she now understood, was love, attention, and presence. It was the simple act of being there, truly being there for the people who needed you. Her husband, too, found himself contemplating the events. He had always prided himself on being successful, on providing for his family, on ensuring they never had to worry about money or status. But the more he reflected, the more he realized that none of that mattered if he wasn't actually present for the people who mattered most, his wife and daughter. What was success if it meant sacrificing the moments that truly defined a life? What was wealth if it came at the cost of connection? It was in these moments of quiet reflection that the couple began to change. Slowly, they started to see their daughter in a new light. No longer just the child they had been raising, but a person, a small but complex individual with feelings, dreams, and fears of her own. They began to listen to her more, to hear her when she spoke, to pay attention to the subtleties of her behavior, the way she would light up when they asked about her day, or how her eyes would dim when she felt ignored. They started noticing the small things, the way she clung to them at night, the way she would reach for their hands in the mornings, the way her laughter echoed in their hearts when they simply spent time with her. At first, it felt awkward. They weren't used to being present in this way, weren't used to slowing down enough to truly connect. But the more they practiced, the easier it became. They found joy in the little moments, the family dinners, the walks in the park, the quiet conversations at night. These were the moments that mattered, the moments that defined their lives, not the luxury of the restaurants or the business meetings or the social gatherings. And then came the moment when they realized just how far they had come. It was a Saturday afternoon, and they were sitting together in the living room, just the three of them, watching an old family movie. Their daughter had curled up on the couch between them, her head resting on her mother's lap, her small fingers clutching a blanket. For the first time in a long time, there was no rush, no distraction, no need to be anywhere else. Just the simple, quiet presence of family. And in that moment, as they shared a quiet smile, they understood. It wasn't just about fixing what had gone wrong. It was about being present, truly present, in the moments that mattered. It was about showing love, showing care, showing empathy in both the big and small ways. And most importantly, it was about seeing each other, the people who mattered most, not as afterthoughts or distractions, but as the heart of everything. The couple's journey wasn't one of perfection. It wasn't a sudden transformation that erased all their past mistakes. But it was a journey toward growth, toward understanding, toward reconnection. It was a slow process, but it was real. In the weeks that followed, they made an effort to change. They took more time off from work, spent more time at home, and prioritized their family. The small gestures of kindness, listening to their daughter's stories, asking about her day, playing games together, became a regular part of their lives. They made sure to show her that she was seen, heard, and loved every single day. And perhaps, in the end, the biggest change was not the outward transformation in their lives, but the shift that had taken place within them. They had learned the value of connection, of empathy, of being fully present in the lives of those they loved. They had learned that the greatest wealth wasn't in material things, but in the relationships they built and nurtured. But what of the stranger? The one who had shown them the path to understanding? He remained a quiet figure, a momentary catalyst in their lives. They would never forget him, or the words he had shared with them. He had simply been a reminder of something they had forgotten, that sometimes the most powerful change comes from the most unexpected sources. In the end, the couple's transformation was a subtle one. They didn't need to make grand gestures or put on displays for the world to see. What mattered was that they had seen each other again, truly seen each other, in a way they hadn't for a long time. They had learned to listen, to love, and to be present. And that, they knew, was the most important lesson of all. As for the child, she flourished. Her once hesitant smile grew brighter each day, her confidence blossoming as her parents grew more attuned to her needs. She felt safe, loved, and understood. And though she would never fully comprehend the complexity of the changes that had taken place, She would grow up knowing that she was the center of her parents' world, a world now shaped by love and presence, not just wealth and success. In the end, it wasn't just about the crying child in the restaurant. It was about the realization that we are all, in some way, crying out for attention, for love, for connection. And the true measure of a person, of a family, is how they respond to those cries, not with indifference, but with empathy, with understanding, and with the willingness to see the humanity in those around them. That was the real lesson, the one that would stay with them forever.